If you've ever heard us or anyone else in the country talk about VO2 Max testing, you've probably heard about our next guest. For the past 13 years, his company Health Matters has led the way in fitness testing, performance enhancing, and overall health-related programs with a primary focus of VO2 testing and metabolic testing. Sean Kinane, welcome to this week's episode of the Any Given Runday Podcast. How are you getting on?
Very good, man. Thank you for having me.
I've nothing to slag Sean with, so I'm gonna, well, which Sean we'll find out. But I'm actually just from hearing the intro, 12 years in business. Is that right, Sean?
13 and a half now.
10 and a half. Back then, like, I didn't know what a Garmin was. I didn't know what Zone 2 was. How did you find out about VO2 maxes, or what was it like to go, do you know what, there's a business here to get into testing? How did you get into this?
In a strange way, really. I was a lift engineer and electrician in Ireland 13 and a half or 14 and a half years ago, and I was traveling to Australia, and I didn't want to work in a lift shaft, so I became a personal trainer and went over to Australia and got a job in a gym and started to work in the gym just as a personal trainer. And one of the guys in the gym had this equipment, and I started to put clients through him, and then I started to work directly with him, and then I left and traveled for another year and did absolutely nothing about it until I came back to Ireland in December 2010 and sat down with my uncle and my dad with numerous different business ideas that I'd seen from traveling through Southeast Asia, South America, Australia, New Zealand, and decided to run with this one. And 13 and a half years later, I'm sitting here now, 20,000 tests, over 20,000 tests done, the most active and experienced tester in Europe, and it's just going from strength to strength to strength.
I mean, like anyone, we've had so many people in the podcast. One of our top guests last year, Michael Fox, was on. He was probably top 2 or 3 downloads last year. And like when someone like him who runs the times he did swears by VO2 max testing, it's like, okay, we have to go take a listen. But before the Michael Fox and stuff, we're talking about that. How hard was it when you initially started to get the country to buy into what you were doing, or did it come rather quickly? Because like back 2013, 2014, yes, there was marathons on, but there wasn't a lottery system back then. You could probably sign up the day of, do a marathon back then. I'm not so sure, but it wasn't as well known as it is now. How hard was it to get started with that?
Look, it was incredibly difficult. I give you some numbers. Like year one of business, I did 252 tests. To put it into context, last week I did 151 tests.
Wow.
So at the start, it was incredibly difficult. There would be weeks that I might do 1 or 2 tests. When I started the company, so just to give you a bit of background on where I am now, I'm set up in my own facility in West Park Fitness in Tallaght. But there could be days where I drive from West Park to Westwood in Clontarf, to Westwood in Leopardstown, to Sportslink in Ringsend, to Raw Gym in Richmond Street. And I might do 1 or 2 tests. I would just be canvassing, and I'd be getting consistently told, no, this isn't for me. It's not for me. I don't know what it is. I have no problem with rejection to a degree. I have no problem, no people saying no. I never didn't believe in the product. I never didn't believe in the service, and I never didn't believe in myself. So I knew that this was an amazing thing. It was just about promoting it and getting it out there and getting people to understand it. And look, the likes of Peter Attia and Paddy Barrett and the growth of health and well-being and COVID, believe it or not, was probably a bit of a positive thing where people came out running and became a bit more in it. And it's just been year on year on year, there's been growth, and it's not stopping. But to answer the question, it was tough. Don't get me wrong, the first 5 years were tough. But as I said, I believed in it from the get-go. And once I believe in it, and I'm a massively driven, and I'm extremely confident in my own ability to deliver the best possible service there is out there in this area of performance and well-being, that it was only a matter of time before it worked. And if I kept throwing shit at the wall, I knew it would stick. And I kept turning up, and I kept getting out there. And I have some really, really good athletes, like you said, the likes of Mickey Fox, and people now that swear by what we do. But look, there's lots of people that don't swear by what we do, and that's fine. So there's many different ways to skin a cat, and the way I do it is very successful when applied correctly.
For a lot of people listening, we hear the phrases and we think we know because Garmin has the little register that says your VO2 max is excellent, and and we hear about zones and we hear about lactate thresholds, we hear about all of these things. What are the basic fundamentals that someone listening to this needs to know about where they are now, what we're looking for, and what that can do for you? What are the baseline fundamentals that people need to know?
I think that the point about wearables, like your watch has no clue about your VO2. Your watch has no clue of your zones. Your watch, and a lot of times people speak about heart rate training that it doesn't work, or there's no point in doing a VO2 test. The people that make these statements or don't understand the application of it. So VO2 stands for volume of oxygen, but it's volume of oxygen consumed in milliliters per kilogram of body mass averaged over a minute. So if your watch is not connected to your lungs, which it isn't, it has no real clue of working out your VO2 max. The VO2 as a number isn't going to guarantee performance in any way, shape, or form. It is going to highlight potential. It is going to tell us many different things about the way you train, many different things about how we need to train. But what I love about the VO2, it's what's in the VO2. It's not just a VO2 number. So people will speak about VO2 not going to help you get better, which is a statement that I would agree on. Not knowing your VO2 is not going to make you a better athlete, but knowing what's under the hood is going to make you a better athlete. So contained within a VO2 test is going to be a VO2 max. We'll look at your heart rate elevation. We'll look at your heart rate recovery. We'll look at your training zones, your thresholds, your caloric expenditure, your fueling type, your breathing patterns. So all of a sudden, this VO2 test is now a complete breakdown of what's going on under the hood. So we can physiologically say, okay, you need to work this way, you need to work that way, you're not fueling adequately, you're not doing this, you're not doing that, or this is how you need to go for the next 12 or 16 weeks. And that's all based off a VO2 test. So I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to say you have to know this information. Knowing the information is undoubtedly, unquestionably, and can't be argued that it is going to give you a much better specific way to train. And what I try and do within the company is to highlight the fact that you, me, Sean, we're all different people. We all have different physiological strengths or weaknesses, and we should all train to that way. And when we work with our body, we get better results.
So with that, we always see an image in my head of a super duper athlete, shredded wheat on a treadmill, hooked up to everything, Rocky version. And I think I'm not fit enough to get on that treadmill. This test will be over in about 30 seconds. Is that true? Like, should people, because that's probably a scary factor for people, or is that the wrong way of thinking about it? Is this a good foundational test to go, this is where you are now, let's try this for a while? Or do you need to have some sort of base or a consistency in training to take on a test like this?
Look, I don't believe there's ever an optimal time to test. People don't test when they're not at their fittest because the ego gets in the way. If you want to get a test done when you're at your absolute best, the only reason you're doing that is to get confidence or ego, realistically. And ego is probably the wrong word. Look, I'll test 2 weeks prior to Dublin just to make sure that everything is where I want it to be. That would probably be the fittest point that I'll ever be in my life. However, I've tested to many different stages. The question in regards to this athletic superstar, if I relied on these athletic superstars for a business, I'd be a long term out of business, I tell you. The quantity of high-end professional cream of the crop athletes I test would be quite limited. Well, not limited, but quite low in regards to the percentage of overall testing. The time to get a test done is the time where you want to start. And getting your information early will make the training block a lot more successful, a lot quicker. So getting it done when you're at your lowest point, getting it done throughout your programming. Use what we do as an example. We do a 20-week program to Dublin. So we test you 20 weeks from Dublin, and then we test you 10 weeks later to make sure that our structure and our programming has gone the right way.
A good couple of years ago, you were down in St. College, and I was doing a course in endurance, and it was around 12, 13 weeks out for the marathon. I was training a bit towards it, and you needed a test volunteer to do it. And I was like, well, I'm training towards the marathon. he has it right there. He gave me my training zones, everything I need to train. I am absolutely not doing it. I sat back down in the chair, someone else went up. So I was like, I can't do it. Just seeing him going through the stuff and all the rest, like, I'm not putting myself out there. What if I, fail the treadmill, like quit too early and all the rest? And then I was listening to, a couple weeks ago, we had Helen at Nurture Man was on the podcast, and she talked about doing her zone 2, her easy runs, and you did the test with her and you said she was actually running too slow. My question is, what is a zone 2 run?
So that's something about Mickey Fox as well. So when I got hold of Foxy, he was a 240 marathon runner, and he was very similar, that he was training too low in his zone 2. So this is another concept where people make the statement that zone 2 doesn't work or heart rate training doesn't work because they use an algorithm that isn't specific to anyone. It's 220 minus your age multiplied by, like your shoe saw is, whatever hours sleep you've had. It's rubbish. It's a completely flawed system. And real simple examples to give you on that before I answer the question about what zone 2 is like how you're born affects your heart rate, i.e., were you emergency C-section or were you natural birth? Were you exposed to drink or drugs growing up? Was there stress in your life? How much caffeine do you have? How much do you sleep? But Mary and Joan are best mates and they're the same age, so they automatically think they should have the same heart rates. It doesn't work like that. We're all completely different. So zone 2 is a parameter or a zone of 2 heart rates. So I'm just going to make it up, or I'll give you my ones. My zone 2 was between heart rate 137 to 151. That's beats per minute. And that's where I know I'm going to perform optimally aerobically. So I'm going to be performing at my most efficient without entering into an inefficient state to be. So for everybody, it's different. So my zone 2 and your zone 2 is going to be different, but it's a performance marker that will limit the negatives associated with training anaerobically. And we cover both terminologies shortly, I would imagine, but it's an area that you'll be able to withstand or you're able to perform for long periods of time.
So we sign up, we have our Garmin, and Garmin says zone 2 for Eric is 140 beats per minute. And I'm not going to lie, I did it for a full marathon block when I first got my new fancy watch and took it as gospel. And look, it did well. It probably put structure on training. It probably slowed me down when I wanted to go fast. It had its frustratingly slow runs. How important is it to be exact with it? And it is a range, and you've described the range there. It's better to be more exact for the individual, I suppose, but how important is it? Because when you go to the upper end of the threshold, say, and you cross over into that opposite zone, anaerobic, for me, I always remember the end means not very long. You're not going to last long as soon as you tip into that.
I like it.
How does that affect, I suppose? Because if 140 for me was the upper threshold and it was always in what's that going to do for me? And why is that element important in terms of the zone?
Sorry, I want to go back slightly though, just on the Helen's statement. Zone 2 for Helen, as she said to you in the podcast, predicted for her, had her walking or had her jogging really, really lightly. So it was a real negative opinion or a negative feeling she'd have associated with running in this zone 2. So she wasn't able to do it because she felt like her gains were going to be very limited because she wasn't pushing on. Same with the Michael Fox situation, we told him to step it up. So using your threshold, and if you were to go, sure, look, what's a beat or two higher? What if I go 153? What if I go 155? We do not, it's not acceptable. It's one beat. If my threshold is 151, I do not exceed that number if the objective of my run is aerobic. So if we look at the energy systems, aerobic and anaerobic are energy systems. Aerobic means we're using high levels of oxygen to create energy. And as a result, we're efficient, we're durable, productivity is low, sustainability is high. As soon as I turn over into that threshold, it's a complete reverse. Anaerobic, we're using less oxygen, we're producing more byproduct, we're increasing the risk of injury, cramp, fatigue, overtraining. But objectively, you're missing the point. Most people build houses on broken foundations, and that's why they don't achieve the times that they try to achieve week in, week out, month in, month out, year on, year out. I have the conversation every day. Had a guy last week in with me And he says all his long runs are done at 4:07, 4:08 pace. He wants to run a sub 3-hour marathon but can never do it. Why is he running so fast on his long run? If he wants to break 3 hours, he needs to run 4:17. His aerobic capacity isn't built. So he's constantly training anaerobically. So the quality of his training is really, really poor. He doesn't know this because it's all he knows. When we train aerobically and anaerobically, it's all about facilitating the next session. It's about delivering a great performance tomorrow. So like today or tomorrow for me is going to be a recovery run, probably a bad week to give you the example this week because of the half marathon. But I'll roll in and out of my week. I'll have a tough session, I'll have an easy session, I'll have an easy session that will lead into a tough session. If all the sessions you're doing are greater than 5 out of 10 on an RPE scale, there's a very good chance you're overtrained. But ego, social media, David Goggins, and the likes of the pressure that's put on people to overtrain all the time is causing so many of these issues where people don't get better. Train easy to train hard. Build your foundation before you put the bricks on. You want a big pyramid, you need a wide base. Whatever analogy you want to use. But if you go out to run aerobically and run anaerobically, the next session you do and everything you're trying to do is being miscalculated and you're not achieving what you're trying to achieve with that session that you've just put down.
Someone goes into you Westpark Fitness and does the VO2 max testing. I've seen you have them on a gradient treadmill and you're pushing them through. How much actual coaching is involved to keep them going to where you want at a certain heart rate? Do you find sometimes someone mentally gives up easy, and does that affect results? Or is it just like you need to push to get like talk me through that?
Yeah, yes. Look, I have a very good handle on people's now nerves and understanding what their feedback is. And if someone doesn't want to talk and they're real nervous, I can kind of step off and I won't talk to them. Or if somebody needs more coaching, I will talk to them. But let's be really, really clear here. You're coming in, you're getting on a treadmill, and for 90% of the test, you're very comfortable. Realistically, the only discomfort is that you've this mask on your face. In terms of the ability to perform and run on a treadmill, most people can do it, unquestionable. But when we start to get up to the higher end things, you're fully anaerobic, you're producing byproduct, you're ventilating out, the mask is getting really, really warm. And that's when people start to psychologically think, I can't do this. So when I start to know, they'll start to move. I'll know all this anyway because I'm looking at the data on the screen. But they'll start to hit the treadmill heavier. You'll hear their feet hitting it more. They'll start looking around more. They'll be pointing. We have an RPE scale on the center of our treadmills. They'll be pointing to them. I'll be asking them, are they okay? And when they start to tell me they're up at that 8 and 9 and they're going to want to stop, I'm like, right, give me another 15, 20 seconds. There's times on the screen. I'm like, right, let's finish the minute. We've just gone 14 minutes, 15 seconds in. I say, right, I need you to get to 15 minutes. But also, if the data has plateaued, my level of encouragement and my statements and my wording is different.
Right.
So I know if the data is in, I'll start to talk to the customer more about where the stop button is, how we can get off the treadmill safely. I'll reassure them that their heart rate is okay. And if they keep pushing, I will start to make statements that, look, we've reached the point of diminishing returns here. We need to get you off this treadmill safely. We're not going to gain anything in pushing you on. So it is very, very important for us as testers to be able to read people, but be able to read the data during the test. And everybody's going to have a different starting point. Everybody's going to have a different finishing point, but everybody's going to get the same set of results in terms of individual interpretation of human physiology specific to them.
You say data multiple. You don't just go in and get a VO2 max test. We're not just getting a number like we've already said, a Garmin's a random number off nothing, but you're not just getting VO2 max tests, you're getting more.
Yeah, that's something somebody says, why would I go in and get a VO2 test? Sure, my watch tells me.
I didn't mean it like that. Like
we work down in Apple. We do a lot of work. I've worked in Apple for nearly 10 years at this point, and we do our testing on site. And obviously, if you work for Apple, you're very much invested in Apple. So we go down and we tell people their real VO2 scores. And they're like, no, but my watch says I got a 60. I'm like, pal, you got a 40. You're nowhere near 60. Like, he's like, no, but my watch told me I did. Yeah, look, within the test. So On the day, we're old school. You leave with a file, a file that's printed out for you. So we'll look at your VO2 max. We'll talk to you about the actual number. I'm very blunt. I'm very honest. People not to give out about me, but I really tell the truth if I think you'll need to lose weight in terms of affecting your VO2 score, because remember, weight is per kilogram of body mass. We'll look at the function of VO2. We'll look at heart rate elevation. So like Helen, I did figure out, or we seem to have figured out that there was something wrong with Helen's heart. And over the years, I've stopped many tests. So we will look at heart rate elevation. We'll look at heart rate recovery. Heart rate recovery is very important. A lot of the high rock style athletes now are coming in with little to no recovery because they're all overtrained. So if you're a high rocks athlete, listen to this, just go and do some green zone stuff. You don't need to go and do 400 wall balls today. We'll look at your training zones. We'll look at your thresholds. We'll look at your energy expenditure. We'll look at your fueling type. So all of a sudden you're coming in and you're getting this complete understanding of your unique physiology to make you a better athlete. The one I love at the moment is fueling. I know Evan was on a few weeks ago. I do a lot of work with Evan. Evan's worked with our Martin groups and stuff, and we work together a lot. And people just can't get over the fact of how much energy I tell them to take on per hour. You know, they're like, nah, sure, I'll go and do 3 hours. I'll have a half a pack of wine gums or something. I'm like, no way. So we look at and we really, and the likes of your 3 hour marathon runners, I firmly believe one of the reasons people don't break 3 hours because they don't fuel adequately. So when we really drive home, if we look at the higher the VO2, the higher the caloric requirement. So if you've someone that's coming in that's a really, really fit, strong athlete, they're burning a lot of energy. So really giving the education on the importance of zonal training, understanding how to grow VO2, talking about the numbers you need to hit when you're hitting intervals, talking about fueling requirements. It is a really in-depth measurement of many different other aspects of performance and not just a number. And this is when, and loads of people say, sure, VO2, that's not going to make me better. They don't understand what they're getting when they come in to do a VO2 if you're stating that statement.
You mentioned high rocks athletes, and this is an extreme version of the question, but you've talked before how VO2 is different. For example, if you're a cyclist, you do it on a bike as opposed to you do it on a run. Have you had someone from high rocks that is elite or thinks they're elite come in and go, well, I need one for running and I need one for the ski and I need one for row, and sure, throw it on me when I'm doing burpee broad jumps as well, and why not? Do you get people doing all different levels, and how different is it, the different disciplines for VO2 max?
So triathletes, as an example, will have different heart rate zones. Their VO2 max will generally be probably bigger in a run because you're more elevated, your diaphragm's open a bit more. Your zones are what's going to differ. And that's the big thing. To go back to the high rocks question, I think, and there is other people that are doing testing in high rock style disciplines, but I think objectively we're missing the point. The reason the high rocks athlete will come into me is to get a test done to make them a better athlete. It's not about making them understand what their heart rate's going to be while doing a burpee jump. It's about optimizing aerobic capacity. It's about growing efficiency, growing economy. High rocks is an endurance sport, believe it or believe it not. And the day people don't think it's endurance is where most people drop off, because you're doing 8 laps. We want your 8 lap to be the exact same as your first lap. If you look at the likes of Michael Smith, I don't know if you know Michael Smith, Mickey Smith from up north, he's one of Mickey Fox's friends. He was like the top CrossFitting athlete in Europe. We've done a lot of work with him to develop this green zone aerobic capacity, and he's absolutely slaughtering it now. So I think the question has to be always asked is, what is the objective of the test that we're trying to give the athlete? What information are we trying to give them? And if we understand what we're trying to achieve by testing, well, then you can kind of map out anything you want at that point.
Two things that have been that I've read into is the two, and one is I've seen with athletes now, they're doing the prick behind the ear test, and I've seen them do the VO2. One is lactate threshold, I believe, and one is VO2. What is the difference between, and what data can you get from both? Is it worth doing all tests, or is too much information, or what is the difference?
So when you lactate, so you should take the blood from the ear, from the finger. So basically, within a VO2 test, we will identify aerobic and anaerobic threshold, also known as AET, turn point 1, VT1, which is ventilation threshold 1, or in traditional blood accumulation or taking of the blood, it would be called lactate threshold 1. So that's when your blood is creating or facilitating greater than 2 millimole of lactate. Lactate is a byproduct that's associated with training anaerobically, so to speak. So they're very, very correlated. So LT1 is identifying the same point as VT1, so ventilation threshold and lactate threshold. VT2, or anaerobic threshold, is known as LT2, which is lactate threshold 2. So you're identifying the exact same point to a degree, just in a different way of measurement. And that's all the difference is. Lactate would have been traditional. Lactate would have been what people would have done way before the advancement in technology, where we identify through ventilation curves. So the change in oxygen utilization versus CO2 production. So once you're above 4 millimole of lactate, you're predominantly performing anaerobically. We'll identify that through gas exchange. So they're just different ways of doing it, basically.
You also do metabolic testing. What's going on there? I've seen the mask, I've seen the treadmill, all the rest. I actually have very little concept of what I know it's, you know, managing weight and different things like that, calories and stuff. But what is the testing involved?
So metabolic testing is done through a very simple 14-minute gas analysis test. So it's a breath test. So it's called indirect kilometry. In order for anybody in the world to burn a calorie, you must consume 0.8 of a milliliter of oxygen. So it's a very simple, block your nose or use the mask and breathe through a small apparatus. And it's a 98% accurate measurement on energy expenditure. So if you're looking at manipulating weight, if you're looking at getting a better handle on energy demands, and a lot of our clients will use these together because we do VO2 testing to identify energy expenditure during exercise, and we'll do metabolic testing to identify energy expenditure in a state of rest with predicted values for lifestyle and activity. So again, like I had a guy in yesterday that told me he wants to drop 9 kilos before Dublin. I nearly fell off the chair. Like 9 kilos before Dublin. And I couldn't get my head around it. I was like, what distance are you running this week? He says he's going to run a 32K on Sunday. I said, how are you going to do that in a 4,000 calorie deficit? Like you're not going to be able to, or in a 7,000 calorie deficit, you're not going to be able to run. He was like, what do you mean? So it's about understanding the balances of getting our energy for performance right, fueling requirement, fueling training load, fueling your job. If you have an active job, if you're a bricklayer and you're running a marathon, your fueling requirements are going to be someone that's different, that's sitting in a chair and running a marathon. So it's, a lot of people will always think weight or metabolic testing is just for weight management. It's not. It's all about performance. And in the corporate world at the moment, like we're doing so much corporate work, and it's all about facilitating the demand on everyday life. Most people think if they're not losing weight, that's it, they're eating enough. And realistically, I would throw it out there, 70 to 80% of people are under fueled, and as a result are underperforming. So weight isn't just the indicator of energy balance. There's a big range there where people underperform in all aspects of their life. And it could be something as simple as memory, irritability, brain fog, lack of sex drive, loss of cycle, failure to get an erection. It can be all simply adjusted by just fueling better and being more tuned in. So metabolic testing can be used for weight management, unquestionably, but I love using it for performance.
Is there any link? Because people say I have a slow metabolism, and this is just me, you know, from stuff I've heard, I'm throwing out all the stuff you hear over the years. You test someone and you find out that they have a lower metabolism. Can a metabolism change? Obviously with demand, your calorie output and stuff, but at your basal metabolic rate, can that change over time? Obviously, as you get older, it might change, but in general, if someone is looking to change their lifestyle for weight loss, but fuel correctly, ultimately, will they change their basal metabolic rate?
Yeah, look, it can definitely be changed, but massive habits have to be changed. And the biggest change in metabolic function is going to come with body composition. So males have a higher metabolism than females, mainly due to weight and muscle ratio. So muscle will burn more calories than fat will in a state of rest to sustain life on a 24-hour period. Now, you're not talking about world-beating numbers here, but if you change the composition of tissue in the body to promote more muscle mass, in a state of rest, you will have a higher caloric burn, but it's not massive, you know. We do see, and we have seen swings of big percentages when people make significant changes to their lifestyle, i.e., they move more, they start weight training, they eat more protein, they put a little bit of lean muscle on. It's not just one effect that's been the reason that it's had such a positive growth. It's an overall thing. And the statement that often gets made is that the metabolic rate gets lower as you age. It doesn't. What actually happens, I suppose it does in the background, but you move less, your muscle wastes, your steps reduce, you don't go to work, you don't go to kids coaching, and your lifestyle changes. But like my dad, I use my dad at the moment, like he's 73 years of age. I've tested my dad every year since the company has started. He weight trains 3 days a week. His metabolic rate hasn't gone anywhere. You know, he's one of these fit men. If you've seen him, like you wouldn't believe his age, how much he's mobile and active. But if you're someone that just goes, I'm 60 now, that's it, game over, not going to walk, not going to train, of course things are going to start to go downhill realistically. But the big one is lack of movement and reduction of muscle mass. They're going to be the big changes in it. I've yet to meet someone with a broken metabolism though.
So here's one. If when I did a good marathon, I was lighter, but more so because I wasn't weight training, I was running. I had lost a good bit of muscle mass. Is that going to have, although my calorific output is huge, am I then suffering then in terms of when I stop running? Is that going to cause a yo-yo effect? Because I'm not like Sean is Mr. Muscle over there, so he's burning calories more than I blink. Like I can't blink quick enough to keep up with the extra he's burning. But like, is that a big difference? Like, should it be better to be leaner, fueling more into these marathons, or like is that what's making a difference then in basal metabolic rate, or is there a way
Like
to
when,
cheat to keep
like
a six
if you
pack?
if you finish your marathon training block and you're lighter and your muscle mass has reduced, yeah, there's going to be what's called metabolic adaptation. You're going to have a lower functioning metabolism, but it's not long term. It's not forever. Like if you just go back training the way you used to train, excuse me, eat the way you used to eat, put on a bit of muscle, it's going to come back up. It's not just set in stone. Like these things change, your body composition change, your movement changes, but everything can be everything can be adjusted. And when people have slower functioning metabolisms, doesn't mean they can't lose weight. Just means they need to eat less than what they're burning. The same principles of weight management apply. So it like when people are pre-exposed to different numbers, you can still achieve weight loss done the same way, but it might just take you a bit longer, or you might just have to sacrifice calories in a different way. But one of the points that I wanted to say on what you said there, when people lose weight, they think that they perform better because they're not carrying the extra weight, which is a true statement. But think about what's happening. The weight that you've lost is no longer there. So the oxygen that was supplying that fat can now go to the working muscles. A lot of the reasons why people perform better when they lose weight is they become more aerobic dominant. They become a lot more efficient because their VO2 has gone higher because there's more oxygen availability. Does that make sense?
Yeah, is there a point there where you could lose too much? We've had a few people on the podcast recently that have talked about how it's there's more to it than the weight loss. And you were touching on it there, which was don't think more about trying to lose the weight, think about more trying to fuel. So is there that balance line, or when you're training people 12, 16 weeks out from the marathon, it's like the goal here is to fuel for your training.
Oh, unquestionable. I do not want any of my athletes, unless they need to lose weight. But when we start to get up to the business end of things, 10 weeks to go to Dublin or 10 weeks to go to any marathon, you need to be performing. You don't need to be worrying about the calories that you're consuming to trigger weight loss. Remember, the fuel you put in is directly related to the performance you put out. And if you're creating too big of a caloric deficit, you are not going to be able to perform the way that you want to do. You are not going to be able to recover. You are not going to be able to produce the force. And there's a very, very high chance you're going to increase the risk of injury, cramp, lowered immunity. whatever it might be, to the extreme where you become, as everyone was speaking about, the likes of fractures or pre-exposing yourself to weaker bones. I personally don't want my clients losing weight on a marathon journey. That can't be their focus.
You obviously know your shit. And you've been in the business so long, 13 plus years doing it. You know the ins and outs of it. You know feeling performance. You're also very active on social media. And like we said at the start of the intro, and it's true, anytime someone mentions VO2 max testing, it's either directly or indirectly linked to you. With that being said, as we record this podcast, you just did the half marathon this weekend. Great time. Congrats on that, your first race. Do you feel any pressure of being like, you're obviously putting in the principles of what you do and trying to get yourself towards that starting line, and anything can happen to anyone leading up to a marathon. Now, I've gone to marathons and I shouldn't have done for various different reasons, injuries and all the rest. It's just I didn't feel, or it was a bad day. Shouldn't have trained. I shouldn't have trained, and got an injury and whatever. Do you feel any sort of pressure documenting your journey week in, week out, close to time, and people looking at it going, what if you don't make the starting line, or what if you don't get the times you want based on your pretty much your livelihood, based on what you do and tell people? Do you feel any pressure at all with that?
No.
Moving on.
Last year I did it as well, and last year I got injured, and I accepted well before I publicized the fate that I wasn't going to do the marathon last year. And it affected people more than it affected me. I had people coming up to me on the street, hugging me and saying they were so sorry that I wasn't going to do the marathon. I was like, it's grand. I'm cool with it. You don't be upset that I can't do the marathon. I really enjoyed the journey. I'm very hard on myself, right? I'm incredibly hard on myself, to the point that I don't leave anything to chance. I stick to what I said I'm going to stick to the letter of the law. Brian Swaby, the running coach on the marathon program that we do, who I've worked with for years, is an absolute hero of a coach. He said recently enough, he's like, fucking hell, Sean, you really stick to what you say you're going to stick to. If I don't stick to what I'm telling people that they have to stick to, that's not the way to do it. I said that I was going to commit to do this. And when I commit to do something and I go on in and I want to go and do it, I go and do it. And I do not care for 1 second what anybody thinks of it or what anybody other's thoughts are on it. I do feel not any pressure. Do you know, the half marathon was some crack every 2 feet. Go on the help, man. Go on the VO2, man. You know, just constantly people shouting at me because we're doing so many appointments. Like Keelan, who works for me, said, you're going to get haggled every step of the way. And it was amazing. Mile 12, up that hill on Sunday, I honestly thought I was done. I thought I'd gone too early. I was going to get sick. And someone just shouted, go on the VO2, man, or something he said. And you know what? It was just, I was gone at that point. And then other people and loads of people had texted me on Sunday night saying to me, that was me that shouted at you at this point. That was me that shouted you at that point. I love the pressure that's associated with it. And if I can help one person understand the journey and the application through my promotion or my documentation of what I do, I think it's amazing. And I've said from the very start, though, I'm very lucky. I have what I would nearly class as professional care. I have nutrition, I have physiology, I have coaching, I have physios, I have everything around me. And I make it very clear to people that they may not get the success at the level that I've got because I have everything at my fingertips to be able to go and do this. I've 5 weeks to go. I'm feeling good. The race was an amazing buzz. I've 32K to run on Sunday. I've 35K to run Sunday week. And then it's taper time. So at this point, we're on track. However, if something derails that track, it's not because of what I've done was wrong. It's just what's happened. I haven't done it wrong. I've done it right to the letter of the law, but that doesn't guarantee anything. I remember last year, I did a much longer training block last year. I did a 12-week block into a 20-week block. And the last training session of my 12-week, I got injured and I never recovered. I never, ever recovered. And I was going out every second day to run a kilometer, to get injured, to come home. And it just pissed me off so much. But I tried. I was physio every day, rehab, gait analysis, a lot. I did everything. And I knew from about, I think 8 weeks out to Dublin last year, the first I ran was 3K. It wasn't going to work at that point, you know. So
Yeah.
no, I don't feel pressure. I really don't. I enjoy pressure. I spoke to somebody today about pressure being a privilege. You know, it's something that I enjoy documenting, and I hope it can give people some insight into what we do and how we apply heart rate training and the caloric aspect of fueling. And like, I dropped 2.9 kilos 2 weeks ago on a 30K. Somebody couldn't understand how I could drop that rate. I burn 1,200 calories an hour when I'm exercising. Like, given the insight into what my heart rate is and my calorie requirements and my fueling strategies has helped massively. I love the messages I get daily on Instagram, just thanking me for the information, is what I love most about what I do, you know.
So many off questions on that. Just the last thing you said there, the 1,200 calories per hour. And I see him smiling because I gave him shit on it when the apps tell you you burn 1,200 calories an hour. I'm like, there's no way you could burn that much. And I have been guilty of under fueling, but that's probably one of the things that a lot of people would underestimate how much they burn in marathon training.
Yeah, so a heart rate 150 for me personally, 82 kilos, 150 heart rate, VO2 at about a 57 at that point. I burn 1,203 calories per hour. That is the very, very high end of my aerobic capacity. My minimum fueling requirement is a third of that. My aim is to consume 400 calories an hour when I'm running.
How do you get that much calories in? Gels is one, obviously sugar, and how do you, it's a lot. It's a hell of a lot of calories.
Is it though? Think about that statement. It's I'm burning, if I'm burning 1,200, it's not a lot.
No, 1,200. So you're looking at 300 to 400 there.
300 to 400 calories. My goal is to consume an hour. And I know it doesn't directly relate, but an analogy that's very simple that resonates is you can't drive a car with no petrol. And if I keep driving my car at 1,200 caloric expenditure an hour, I'm going to run out. And we talk about we've pre-eaten and we've carb loaded and everything associated. Realistically, our maximum glycogen storage capacity is 500 grams. That's 2,000 calories. I'm at glycogen storage, 2 hours before I stop eating or finish eating. I go through my day, I go into the Dublin Marathon, I hang around for 2 hours. That glycogen storage is already on the descent. It's not at 500 grams. And then I need to go and perform. There's going to be probably, in my race on Sunday, I did 12K of that anaerobically. So that is fueling directly off glycogen. I'm going to run out of fuel, unquestionable. And this is why many people, in my opinion, do not achieve the goals they want to achieve because they simply don't eat enough fuel. People, I can't take that many gels. Train yourself. Train the gut. Start 6 months ago. I've started, and before I got into this marathon training, distance-wise, I'd go out for a 45-minute run, I'd take a gel. I didn't need the gel, but I knew in 16 weeks' time, I was going to need to be. I took 7 gels on my 30K there a few weeks ago. 7. I felt unbelievable. Finished sub 5-minute kilometer, the last 5K, came home, had a shower, got changed, went up to the park, walked, did another 15,000 steps or whatever that day with the kids. Is that one of the reasons because I fueled adequately? Probably. If I didn't fuel enough, there's no hope I was going to do that. If you don't fuel enough, you're not aiding recovery. And it might seem like a lot, and the awareness and the statement of that's a lot. But when you put it into context, if I put 1,200 out and I've only put 300 back in, I'm still in a 900 calorie deficit that hour. And within 2 hours, I'm goosed. That's gone. You don't have more of it.
Is this the wall?
Yes.
What we just described the wall? Is this the answer to a lot of, not all problems? There's different reasons, psychological, physiological, but for the most part, in 80% of cases, is this the wall?
I experienced it 18K in a couple of weeks ago. I thought I was going to win the marathon. At 20K in, I couldn't walk. And you know why? I brought half a pack of fruit pastilles with me because Cycle Superstore, I'm shouting at you now, was closed when I went to get me gels. And I said, I'll be grand, you know? And it was the first time and the only time I'll ever hit the wall. Because since then, I've made sure my gels are out. I drive the route. I leave a bottle of Lucozade. I leave water out. Is it hitting the wall? Many different factors will cause you to hit the wall, but being underfueled is without question one of the main or the main contributing factor to what you've said, hitting that wall. And day in, day out, I am in, like you were in shock when I told you I eat 300 to 400 calories an hour. When someone tells me they took a gel in a 3-hour run, I'm just like, are you seriously? How do you expect to perform? And a lot of the time, it's weight. Oh, but I don't want to gain weight. I've just told you I'm burning 900 calories an hour. Unless you're going to be putting in 1,000 an hour, you're not coming back here in a surplus. You're coming back in a significant deficit. And it's that awareness and the education and the promotion and the fact that I have it on paper and I can show it to them that this is their energy expenditure and the buy-in. And even going back on what we spoke about over the podcast, I've had people ring me, I can't train, I'm fatigued, I've no energy. And I'm like, what are you doing? They're doing fasted anaerobic training with no caloric replenishment. And I'm like, what do you expect? I did a great test, actually. I'll give him a shout out. Gav Maloney from Back to Basics. He came into me 2 days ago and he brought me 8 bottles of Lucozade, 2 crates of them. I says, what's this? He goes, he had rang me a few months ago. He was knackered. He couldn't train. He didn't know what was going on. But he was anaerobic training on 5 hours sleep with no glycogen. I said, man, just drink a bottle of Lucozade on the way to training and you'll be grand. And he said, every day now, just Lucozade on the way into training, you know.
On that then, people do fasted cardio, just the morning fasted cardio for whatever reason. That's the reaction I was looking for. Just 30 seconds of debunking that will do.
Would you drive a car with no petrol? Fasted cardio, why? Why do you do it? That's what I want to know. People come into me and they talk about fasted cardio, and I say, why? Why are you doing it? It's putting you at a disadvantage. It's pointless. You achieve nothing. The concept of you're trying to increase fat max, right? Have you heard this one? People are right. To increase fat max, you need to fast in to your training session. You do not pass threshold 1, and you fast out of your training session for about 4 hours. It takes about a year to get the smallest minimal gain in fat max. It's absolutely one of the worst and pointless contributing factors to performance that I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah, I'm not to that. I don't do fasted cardio, by the way. But there's been times where like you're chasing the 6-pack goal, you read something, you're like, oh, I just go in and do 30 minutes on the elliptical or the bike or something before doing my session fasted. And I can't. I'm at stage now where I need food before any sort of training. I know I need fuel.
Let's go back. Sorry. If you're someone that's a physique model that's stepping on stage and you're willing to go in and walk extremely slow or step or elliptical really slow, there is going to be a very small contributing factor to the reduction of body fat for physique models. Unquestionable.
But they're not performance athletes on the stage, so they are at their weakest on stage.
You are not a performance athlete. And a lot of physique models are very unhealthy.
Yeah, I'd agree.
So it has a place. If you're someone that trains at 6 a.m. in the morning, and you can't stomach eating, have a big carb meal the night before, have a big glass of apple juice before you go, sup a half bottle Lucozade on the way, have something. Just get that carbs into the blood sugar. Apple juice, I just promote apple juice all the time. Like 200 ml of apple juice has 30 grams of carbohydrate in it. Like, it's phenomenal stuff. But a bottle of Lucozade only is 120 calories. Lucozade is glycogen or is glucose. It's ready. It's originally developed for diabetics. It's ready, available fuel. The quality of your training will increase. The quality of the stimulus of your training will increase. And the overall benefit of going in with a performance fuel will benefit. It's like people doing their interval sets at 8 o'clock at night. but they've only ate their lunch at 1 o'clock. I'm like, why do you think you can't run fast? You know, like it's people don't think about their fueling. That's a fact. They don't think about what's required. And one of the big things when people leave my office, they're like, Jesus, there's lots for me to think about here, isn't there? And that's what I want people to do. I want them to question. My job is to critically evaluate. My job is to play devil's advocate. I ask questions the whole time that I know they're not going to know the answer to, but it's to highlight the lack of awareness in what could be a very successful training block, but they're not doing it the right way.
So beyond performance, a test like this, I mean, you said you do a lot with guys, and you said, well, my watch tells me this and that and the other. Lifestyle can change with a lot like this, even if you're not doing a marathon. If you're doing a VO2 just to see where you are, you know, what a walk will get you, what the heart rate will mean in terms of calorific burn, because people say just get your 10,000 steps in, and what intensity did you do them 10,000 steps? You know, is that going to make a big difference to lifestyle when people have this knowledge? Is that something you see with clients?
Like Peter Attia, praise Peter Attia because he makes me very busy. Dr. Paddy Barrett, the likes of the general population now are coming in because of the awareness around, like, they're now saying VO2 is a number. There's no other known health metric to predict longevity. That's amazing to be able to come in and me to tell you this is what your score is. And if I had a guy, October 22, who came in and scored a very low score, the worst possible grade he could get for his age, he just had his firstborn child. He said he wanted to change his life. And within a year to the day, October 23, he tested, he went to superior. He added 15 years onto his life. His heart rate was lower, his recovery was better, his lung function was better. Like, all these parameters for him were just awe-inspiring. But it was nothing about marathon training. It was about health and longevity and well-being. We speak about zone 2, how 90 minutes a week in zone 2 has been proven to decrease risk all-cause mortality. If I can arm somebody with the information, here's your zone 2, we have a massive positive effect on their life. Recently enough, I tested an 83-year-old man. He had tested with me when he was 73. And he said he had applied to the letter of the law what I told him when he was 73. And now he wanted new numbers. He's a member of West Park, absolute hero of a bloke. And every week, 90 minutes a week, done that zone 2 there, Sean, you know. And I was like, Brian, you're going to keep living, pal, you know. And he's one of these outfits that's strong as an ox doing farmer carries up and down the gym, you know, jumping on his bike doing zone 2 then. He's getting the strength benefits. He's going to stay strong. He's going to stay mobile. And he's getting the cardiovascular benefits of knowing his number without overtraining. So he's not pushing these high parameters.
Have you heard of the Norwegian protocol?
Yep.
So seemingly it's, I say seemingly, but what I've heard of it before is that it is a protocol to increase VO2 max. So it's 4 minutes of hard work. Let's say you hop on an assault bike. 4 minutes hard, 3 minutes rest, go for 4 rounds. I have that right, do I?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on people training? Is that a good protocol for someone to train specifically VO2 max, or is it no, just do your run towards what you want to do? Like, would you recommend something like a Norwegian protocol for or a workout that's specifically designed to increase VO2 max? Does that make sense?
Yeah, but you have to remember the stimulating aspects to grow VO2 have to be accompanied by the facilitating aspects of recovery, growth, and adaptation. You can't just constantly do 4x400s day in, day out, because you're not going to be able to facilitate it. So 4x4x4x4x4 is going to be done a couple of times a week. But the other aspect of it is you're going to be growing VO2 is one thing, using VO2 is the next. So just think about the statement. I get you in and I test you and you score a 62 VO2 max. And I get Eric in and he has a 51 VO2 max. But if Eric has a much bigger aerobic capacity than you do, Sean, he's going to outperform you. So it's about learning to use the VO2 as well. And the way we use VO2 is by training in zone 2. What you increase when you train in zone 2 is what's called stroke volume. So your body will learn to deliver more oxygenated blood with each beat of the heart. So if we can start to produce a bigger VO2 by doing the likes of our Norwegian protocol, and then we can train in our zone 2 to facilitate the use of the higher VO2, that's when you become a better athlete. If you just keep throwing these high numbers at the VO2, but do no aerobic adaptation or no aerobic growth, the point of them sessions or the point of the growth of the VO2 then is gone downhill. And this is the big success where I'll use me as an example. 15 weeks ago, I did a test. My threshold pace per kilometer was a 5:51. 15 weeks later, for the same heart rate, I'm running sub 5-minute kilometers. Is it because my VO2 has gone up? Yes, but the reason why it's gone up, mainly the reason why the pace has gone up is because my aerobic capacity has grown. My usage of that oxygen has gone up massively. And this is something that people find when they're training for a marathon. Their VO2 starts to go downhill on their watch and they're thinking, what's going on? This isn't right. The reason your VO2 goes down on a watch when you're training for a marathon is because you don't do as much high stimulation.
Right. No, that makes sense. Yeah, it has dropped me twice. It went leading up to it. No, my VO2 hasn't. The number, like the data of the thing, it's just the number has changed twice.
We do two VO2 tests in our marathon program, and the second test for everybody, I tell them, I say, look, I don't care if your VO2 has gone down here. I really don't. I want your economy to be up. So upon retesting, I want a longer test, a lower max heart rate, a better recovery, and a better speed of breakdown. If your VO2 has gone down, I do not care, because I've made you a more endurable athlete, and your goal to run a marathon is to run it as efficiently and as aerobically as you possibly can while delivering performance consistently.
John, it's been great listening to you, full of knowledge. There is one thing you have said that I would 100% disagree with, without doubt disagree with. You know, you talked about doing a half marathon there after 9K, you kicked on towards a 15K and people cheering you on, and you get to the finish line and you got your intended time by 30 seconds, and you're doing a Dublin marathon as recorded in 5 weeks' time. The Dublin marathon to the half marathon is a completely different beast. You're going to know so many more people. They're going to be cheering you on more. Whether you get your time or whether you do not get your time, you will get a text off Dublin Marathon in 48 hours asking you, do you want to do this again? And you told me before we started recording that there's not a hope of you doing it again. And I'm not too sure you're going to look at that and go, nah, the buzz I got in that day, there is no way. I don't know if you can turn that down another time when you go through what you go through in 5 weeks' time.
We'll see. I agree we'll agree to disagree on that. And you know what? It's not the enjoyment factor. It's my life. I do not have the time to train as much as I do at the moment.
To make your life even busier, someone listens to the podcast goes, that's it. I want to make a start in this. I want to get a VO2 max test. And I want to get a metabolic test. And I want to know how much calories I'm burning and get my numbers down and train what is true zone 2 training. How do they get in touch with you and how do they get VO2 max testing? What's the best way?
Anyway, through Instagram at Health Matters IRE, or the website is myhealthmatters.ie, or just ring me. My number's on the website. We are incredibly busy. We're about 6 to 7 weeks on bookings. That's 6 days a week, generally 9 till 9, Monday to Thursday, and then 8 to 6 on a Friday and Saturday. We do travel, we do corporate stuff, we do clubs, we do full weekends, Saturdays and Sundays. So basically, I'm sure I'll be tagged on any of this stuff in regards to Instagram and then just myhealthmatters.ie. But if you send me an email, I'm just going to ask for your number. So feel free to ring me. I much prefer to talk on the phone than communicate via email.
Fair enough, Sean. I know you got the mighty Aston Villa are playing now on TV. So I know you're going to go watch that.
I'm just literally going to just turn and put it on.
I saw the clock. It's like, right. I gotta wrap this one up. Absolutely fantastic listening to you. Full of knowledge. Absolutely brilliant. Really enjoyed this episode of the podcast. And that is it for this week's episode of the Any Given Runday Podcast. Myself, Sean, and Eric. Take care.
Cheers, man.